Super Bowl edition of the Ad Podcast. We've got Nick Miaritis in the house coming off of the Bill Shat campaign last night for WK Kellogg and Raisin Bran. Let's go.
Hold on.
We got some swag. We got all of it. Let's
Anybody
go.
who hits us up and asks for a jersey, this might get some merch from this podcast.
Jersey comments in the chat for sure. All right. Nick is a very prominent advertising and marketing executive serving as Global Chief Client Officer at VaynerMedia. He leads creative and media agencies under VaynerX, based in New York. He joined the agency in 2018 and leads brand partnerships, accelerates client growth, builds new agency capabilities, and oversees high-profile campaigns. An example would be the Super Bowl work that you just saw last night for WK Kellogg and Company. Prior to VaynerMedia, he spent 12 years at Saatchi & Saatchi, where he worked globally, led teams on iconic campaigns, including the Cannes Grand Prix winning It's a Tide ad Super Bowl spot and Miller Life's High Life's 1-second ad, and honored expertise in integrated creative strategy and brand storytelling. A Georgetown University graduate where he played men's lacrosse, Nick is also known as the Omelet King with a popular Instagram handle. 82,000 followers and YouTube followers as well, focused on egg cooking hacks and fun content. Let's go. He's got all sorts of visuals so that he's a trivia enthusiast and co-founder of the trivia app Fleetwit, advisor to placements platform Prize Out, and was appointed to the board of directors of Scott's Miracle Grow in 2025. He's a frequent speaker, LinkedIn thought leader with over 16,000 followers, and contributor on topics like Super Bowl advertising, creativity, consumer trends, and agency innovation. He's active on the social channel Nick Miaritis on X, and he shares marketing insights, team pride, and personal stories. Nick, how you doing, man? You still alive?
I'm getting there. I had my Raisin Bran this morning. I hope you all did. or if you haven't, I hope that you all go on Amazon right now, being like, oh, crap, I forgot my Raisin Bran last night. So that would be very helpful.
Let's go. In full transparency, this is not a plug. This was not staged. I don't really eat cereal, but when I do eat cereal, I eat Raisin Bran with bananas chopped on top.
You're like the Dos Equis man of breakfast. I always eat cereal. What I do. That makes me very happy. It's a phenomenal product. Unchanged.
It is really great. It stands the test of time for sure, and it's good for you. You know, it's not like the sugary cereals that will go unnamed. So, yeah, man, I just gave a little bit of bio, and I can't wait to get the play-by-play, as they would say, for Super Bowl and kind of how everything came together. You know, I got to, see you a couple of times in and out of events over the week leading into Super Bowl. But before we jump into the thick of it and all things Bill Shat, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you study? And what got you into the advertising industry?
Sure. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, hope you're recovering from Super Bowl as well. Got my voice back, so I'm lucky to do this one. 8 a.m. this morning, I didn't know this one would happen. I grew up out in a beautiful place called Stony Brook out in Long Island, New York. And from my earliest days been, a lover of all things advertising. So if my mom were here, she would laugh because she hates when I tell this story. But rather than putting up posters of athletes and what normal kids did, is my first love affair of things that I put up on my wall were the Absolute vodka ads.
Ooh,
which
let's go.
9-year-old, it was one of the best campaigns of all time. If anybody's out there as an ad geek, buy the book Absolute Book off Amazon today. It is a elite coffee table book, and it is. I'm very romantic about advertising in many ways, and that book and the funny part about how I accumulated finding those ads were. I had this awesome privilege of growing up in the restaurant and hospitality business, and we owned a place called the Three Village Inn out in Stony Brook. It's one of the oldest businesses in America from 1755, and every month we would get Country Inns magazine, and on the back of Country Inns magazine was an Absolute ad. And so it took me like 8 years, but I collected every single one, from the Warhol one to Absolute Citron, like the iconic, form factor of those ads. I don't know what happened. I saw it when I was like 9. I was just like, this is amazing. It's going up on my wall. And I was like, this is kind of what I want to do with my life. So I discovered pretty early on that I loved advertising. I loved communicating with people. And that led me to Georgetown, where I studied marketing and theology, which could be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it's a good background.
I wrote a lot and talk a lot about, marketing and theology and the intersection of those two things, which is super fun. And then had the good fortune of stumbling into advertising through a cold call at Saatchi & Saatchi when we sold our family's business. And I got hired, funny, coming full circle on this podcast for real, is I got hired to work on kids cereal. So
wow.
Boo, General Mills, yay, Kellogg's. But my first ad was working on a tag in our industry, a 10-second spot animated for a new double chocolate cookie crisp, which I helped create with a friend of mine because nobody wanted to do it. And at the end of it, I had this spot with Chip the Wolf, who was kind of like a poor man's Trix Rabbit. That was kind of like the plot of it. And I just, having gone through the process of creating advertising, I did not believe, coming from the restaurant business, that you could get paid to do such a thing. I was like, no way. This is an actual job. There's no calluses on my hands anymore. You're not washing dishes. You're not dealing with crazy customers who hate their steak, all that stuff. And I always equate advertising to, if anybody's in the ad industry or marketing, you got to pinch yourself, every day, because it's almost like the movie Big, if you know the reference.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Hanks goes and works at the toy company. That's how I felt for basically the last 20 years. Each day when I walk in the office each morning, I'm just like, wow, what a gift it is to be able to do this for a living, where we just get to come in and play and come up with ideas, and then get those ideas, to hopefully get somebody to turn towards the brand and like it more or buy it. And it's just, it's been a pure joy. And it's been something I had looked forward to, but didn't know that it existed in terms of an industry. I always knew I would want to do something around marketing, but had no idea that ad agencies existed. And now that I found it, it's I was joking last night, I can't wait till I'm 112 and I'm in a war room on Super Bowl Sunday, live tweeting with whatever energy I have left in my left finger to hit the button on the computer or whatever the time. So I've been at it now for a while. I was at Saatchi for a long time. And then I started a trivia gambling company with my buddy Dave Metz, and met Gary about 9 years ago, and was so taken back by what he was doing in our industry. And I always kind of knew that the Netflix of the advertising business would not come from Blockbuster, kind of where I was. And when I heard him talk about his vision of, what he wanted to build and how he wanted to treat people and the culture that he was creating, it was just intoxicating. So much left to drink. It was March 15th, 2017. I left to drink, being like, I think that just completely changed the trajectory of my life, and jumped in on Handshake to be like, I'm Nick, I'll come over, we'll do the thing. And so I just have coming up on my 8th anniversary.
Wow, that's a great story, man.
Every hat you can wear, from writer to director to producer to account person to traffic person and everything in between. I love all facets of the ad game. And so, it's pure fun.
I love it. I can relate to the collecting advertising industry paraphernalia. I go to thrift stores and mainly antique malls, and I try and find the oldest magazines and the oldest brand memorabilia. And I'm launching another podcast called Brand Hunters that goes into the history of brands. There you go. Old Kool-Aid. Yep.
An offer?
We'll see. Yeah. We'll talk offline.
Unboxed Kool-Aid, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, and if I were to bring you into my hallway behind me, it's all of my hallway is vintage ad posters, and people who come over to my house, they sometimes are a little taken back by it, but those of us who love it, that's kind of what we do. So I wanted to tell you about my first couple Gary Vee experiences. So I actually met Gary 20 years ago. I was running a wine publisher called youngwinos.com when he was doing Wine Library TV. And we were basically a community of people drinking and reviewing wine on our free time and blogging about it. It was just a wine club that we formed on Craigslist. And then we started we started putting our reviews on a blog, and then all of a sudden all these wineries were reaching out to us wanting to send us wine, and they were actually like driving us up and down from Napa and Santa Barbara and Temecula, because all of them wanted to get after these like younger wine drinkers, because if you can get somebody in their 20s who's an enthusiast, they ladder up with the brand and they spend more over their total life. So Gary and Tom Likas with the tasting room on Saturdays were kind of some of our very early influences in this idea of like wine influencers. And then I didn't get to meet Gary at that point, but my next experience was 15 years ago when I was working at my first agency. Me and my friends went down to the gym and we played a game of we were working out, and we posted something on Twitter, like, through Squarespace or something. We're like, oh, great day at the gym. And then all of a sudden General Electric's Twitter reached out to us, and they're like, hey, Dylan, like, we really appreciate your commitment to your health. DM us your address. And I was like, okay, I'll play along. I put my address in the Twitter chat, and then a few days later, we got a basketball from GE, and like we all took pictures with it and stuff. And then we found out later that was like the very first VaynerMedia social engagement campaign for General Electric. And then I finally got to meet him at South by Southwest, and many of his books are up in the the library here. But my question to you is, Gary is polarizing in the industry, I think, a lot because he's disruptive to the traditional ways of doing business. So there are people like, I think you and I, who have absolutely said, wow, like this guy is a total futurist and he knows where everything is headed. But then there are also like old guard people who are critical. As a guy who came up through Saatchi and some of these storied agencies and worked on some of these big campaigns, how did you have the foresight to like see like, okay, this guy's doing something that's very different and this is going to be a rocket ship?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say you could feel it pretty quickly with him. And I polarizing, maybe all those things might be true. Perceptually for me, that really wasn't the thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2017, I kind of knew him more as a wine guy and the crushing. And so when I met him, I'd only come across him a couple times where he was kind of stealing clients of mine. So I was kind of like, fuck you. I was just like, more like, stop stealing business from me. It was like, because you understand what Twitter is and I don't. And so I guess like maybe, there's some truth to what you're saying is a lot of people might just not understand that which he, is super passionate about, which is where everything's going. And so they might have issue with that, but, it's a business and, we're all competing against each other. But once I got to know him and started that night I just think like he brought an element of common sense, which I felt was really missing from our industry or had been lost, and tie that to a new device with new platforms requiring a new way of doing things. And a couple of things just clicked for me instantly because of experiences that I'd had within my past life, where I remember when the iPhone came out in our industry, in my agency, there was, talk of, and again, it's so long ago now that it's almost funny to think about. There was talk like you will never shoot a single photo or video on a phone, quote unquote, right? Like, so like there just wasn't like pragmatism in our industry that much. And so I think with what Gary was doing when I met him, and it's still true to this day, is just being like ridiculously commonsensical and consumer centric, which is what we always were trying to do within the ad industry. But I think our way of working got in the way of that. And I think where I started to get a little bummed as I had some success and, was leading bigger teams, is I started to realize that the majority of ideas, if you think about like getting something out of an ad agency, in terms of creative product, it goes from teams working on something like this, and then it just keeps getting narrowed down to like scarcity of ideas, to then take all the money and bet it on one thing that the senior people, whether it's the client and the agency together, think is the bet, and then spend even more money to go, amplify that with media and potentially disastrous creative, but you're just going on your gut and intuition. And I think deep down, I knew that it was really bad for business and secondarily, really bad for people and creativity. And so I really started to think as a creative industry, I was like, there's like scarcity mindset here, and the system of subjective bias around the work is probably leaving some of the best things at the agency on a share drive that no client's ever even seeing. And then with the clients, it's never being made because it's built around a system where it was kind of fit for use for television. And so I think what was really disruptive, Lucia, hey, everybody, I've just taken over Dylan's podcast.
You're good. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Well, keep it. You
But I
were
think
saying the
what
systems, yeah.
What really happened was we tried to, it's like a round hole, square peg thing, is we were trying to use the process of creating television commercials to create things for social media and all types of new media. And I think what you saw very quickly was that, and it's more true today than it ever is that the abundance of creative needed to create relevance to Dylan versus Nick based on life stage, where you're at, what you're looking to buy, and all the things that you now know about people, is that the old model of making those things of making a few things wouldn't allow you to make a lot of things. And so I think what Gary and the team had done here prior to me getting here and now really in an exponential way is just continue to reduce the friction and also the cost to actually make the end variable, the actual work product that the consumer sees. And so to me, like what I fell in love with when I met with Gary outside of the vision for the culture and the human being that he is, and the humans at this company, was this idea that like we would have creative abundance in the world, that we would find the right idea through iteration of ideas versus arguing about them in a boardroom. And that had really never been contemplated before in our industry. And in fact, like almost the opposite existed, is that if you got your way to the top, you were expected to be the person who picked that one thing that was going to be transformational for the business. And I think more damage has been done the last 20 years off of that audacity of thinking that because you have great taste and you did it before on some awesome Super Bowl ad. Like that doesn't give me the right to say that next year's Super Bowl is going to be awesome, And so I really think that was like what struck me as so amazing is that like there was a potential with Gary and hopefully with others listening to this and other agencies the world over now, seeing that like our job is to unleash creativity, not to stifle it. And then paid media works super hard once you really focus in on the creative variable and get that honed in and all the other things that, PR and influencer and everything else, I think is layered on top of that. But foundationally, the thing that changed is the culture around creativity. And if that's polarizing, at this point, I think like that debate's over. And I just feel bad for anybody still hanging on to that because it really leads to like not a lot of work being done. B is not a lot of retention of employees because they don't get to make anything. And C, not a lot of transformation of businesses, which is why people pay us in the first place, is to sell more of their stuff. And I think that the world is quickly catching on now that that's going to be kind of where things continue to go. So I just hope anybody listening out there like challenges that old status quo of like creative scarcity, subjective bias, a love of process that just weeds ideas out based on politics, those types of things. And that's really what we've been trying to inject into our companies, our partners, and hopefully the industry at large.
Yeah, I love that. I think the idea that there could even be such thing as a shitty Super Bowl ad now flies exactly in the point of what you're saying. Like, how could a group of people possibly get to the end product and spend $10 million to put it on the Super Bowl and it not be good and not resonate with audiences?
We start working on Super Bowl. I remember when we killed Mr. Peanut, which was like, wow, you killed Mr. Peanut, like a bomb went off. Is that started 8 months prior, of really trying to understand like what's going on in this business. Why are people not eating Planters peanuts as much? Like, does anybody even care about this mascot? Just asking all those big questions, but instead of asking them and then debating the merits of the questions and the answers in a boardroom, we just started creating social media ads at a tremendous volume to understand the feedback we would get from, putting something out, listening, analyzing it afterwards. And we do a thing here called post-creative strategy. We actually have a role that's called post-creative strategist. And it's so fun for me coming from the ad industry is that strategy was always something you did in the upfront. And then they kind of go away, you produce the ad, and then you kind of hope it works. In our company, like once you create the thing, the strategy starts after that. So it's before and after. And the post-creative strategy enriches the entirety of the idea and where the brand goes over time. So on Mr. Peanut, like when we finally got to, killing him on the Super Bowl, that was like a very high probability bet for what outcome we were trying to drive in that business based on hundreds of pieces of creative that gave us signal back from the actual end consumer that it would be something that would work. And so I feel like it's like creativity is still the core of it, but it's almost like an engineering mindset around how to iterate and find momentum with ideas live and treat the internet basically as one giant focus group every day.
I love that. That's such a cool hint into your guys' process. So, with that, let's get into Bill Schatt. So, WK Kellogg and Company, were they a existing AOR client, or did they come to you for a Super Bowl campaign? And tell me how you use that process of iterative testing and kind of seeding out ideas to audiences to try and come up with the insight ahead of time. Like, can you walk me through that process a little bit as it's hot off a brand new Super Bowl campaign that just ranked great over on Ad Meter and all the metrics?
Cool. Yeah. So, it's a privilege to work in cereal again. Obviously, I kind of started my career at General Mills and was always very jealous of them. Like at that time, it was the early days of the Special K challenge, which was basically like the best idea of all time, which was just take a challenge by eating Special K. It was awesome. It was like the answer, to the challenge was eat Special K. It was just so pure of an idea and it worked super well. And so I love their brands. I love their people. And Doug, who's their chief growth officer over there, we started working together in official capacity about a year ago now. And I think what fires me up so much about what they're doing over there is, I think, cereal, because it's something that's been such a staple for, all of us, anybody's been alive for a long time, is I think you tend to think like, oh, it's there, but like maybe it's not as relevant as it once was. There's some alternative ways to, eat eggs for breakfast, other ways to get protein or fiber or these things.
Eggs, of course.
Yeah, no, it's so eggs and cereal are a lovely pairing. But we started working with him about a year ago, contemplating all types of things, which is cereal in a different food aperture, right? Like that's a thing that I've been passionate about probably for the last 20 years is like, why is cereal confined to breakfast? Chips, cookies, like chocolate, they have these other use cases in the snacking ecosystem, throughout the day. And I always felt like the form factor of the cereal box is always a little bit limiting. It's kind of like a thing that sits in the cupboard versus like a grab and go type of format that you can have during the day. But, just recently having a 3-year-old, having like, cereal on you wherever you go in the stroller, it's like, it's the best snack and kids are obsessed with it. So Doug and the team are really reimagining what cereal can be. And so we started in that realm, not even focused solely on Raisin Bran, but on other brands and their full kind of suite of brands of where are some other places that cereal can play. And if you go back, after this, or if anybody's listening, go and look at a handle called "It's Not That Cereal." You can go on TikTok, you can go on Instagram, and you'll just see the team is really using handles, and it's the strategy I implore everybody to think about, which is outside of your core brand's handle, given that media now, starting with how TikTok algorithm and product changed pretty much all the other social platforms, is any handle can compete against the biggest influencer in the world today. So if you have 10 followers, you could get 10 million views easier than me, the Omelet King or Gary can with all of his followers. And the merit of the creative is really what allows for the distribution, which is, very different from how we all grew up in social, which was about followers, right? And then reaching those followers or those followers sharing things to their followers. And so handle strategy is a big 2026 imperative for all brands, whether you're a creator, whether you're a brand, is having more than one handle. There's a case to be made that you should have potentially dozens of them. But it's not that cereal is really an insights machine for the company to investigate all the hypotheses, all the spaces that we're thinking about playing in. And that is everything from midnight snacking to dinner to breakfast, new formats, new innovations. And I think somewhere along the lines, I kind of forget exactly how it started, but I think it probably started with, and you'll identify with this, is it was and has been kind of the year of protein for a really long time.
Yeah.
It was a year of protein for 10 years, and it really hit fever pitch last year where it just started to become like an SNL meme of like, protein in your,
Lettuce.
lettuce, protein in your yogurt, protein in this. And so there's nothing wrong with protein, but I think we protein maxed last year a bit, and we started to see through iterating, through listening to what's going on in the pipes of social media with consumers, is that the fiber story is one that is still feeling like it's on the rise, but actually culturally, it's a very big deal. It's related to a lot of the macro things going on in health and wellness and how Americans are living their lives. And what we uncovered pretty early on through doing lots of advertising each day in the pipes of social media to listen and get insight is that over 95%, and that's a crazy number, 95% of America is actually not getting enough fiber.
Wow.
And that is not a good thing, number one. Number two is, I think what you see when you execute a lot of advertising and social media and you listen a lot to influencers and podcasts and everything that's out there is that there's never been more noise about these subjects, right? There's more experts every day talking about how to get fiber, the best way, the worst way, all of that in between. But then again, the problem's never been as bad, that 95% of people still aren't getting enough fiber. And I think what we were able to find is this sweet spot with Kellogg's is that it's one of those simple, timeless things that you don't have to listen to 10 hours of Instagram or me on a podcast to actually like intuitively know, like all I have to do is add this to whatever else I'm eating the rest of the day, and I'm pretty much there. And so there's just something beautifully simple about Raisin Bran. There's something beautifully simple about cereal in general. A lot of them have a lot of fiber in it. And one thing led to another, and it just started pointing to us that like with something so big of an opportunity and such a deficiency of literally 95% is the moment of the Super Bowl, which I would say is about like excess and just letting it rip that day. Is such a good juxtaposition, such a good moment to come through with a message of like, hey, like you're not getting enough fiber, and this is the way to go do it. And then I think we were able to figure out a pretty fun way for anybody who hasn't seen the spot with Will Shatner, who's a national treasure at this point, 94-year-old William Shatner, just to communicate that very simple message in a way that would break through. And so, I think we were able to do that. The team, worked their asses off, did it so well. Execution, I thought, was a 10 out of 10. It was so good. We can talk more about it. But that was really the origin story and the opportunity of like why Super Bowl. And so, with having a confluence of variables of something powerful to say, a product that backs it up, and a media moment, it's kind of like the opposite or a good place to get contextually into that subject while everybody is simultaneously, like drinking beer, having wings, and probably feeling the worst they're going to feel when they wake up. So that's usually a pretty good recipe in terms of context to be very relevant as a brand when you're a brand like Raisin Bran. And so I think that those ingredients really helped it take off. And then on top of it, the execution being pretty funny, broke through.
I love it. Where did you land on the insight of William Shatner? How did he come into your guys' orbit as the right spokesperson for this spot?
This is a deep one. I'm not sure how much time we have, but
yeah, we'll go. We can go as long as you can.
Some really funny conversations that kind of led us to the situation place, the capacity of William Shatner. But I would say this, a funny starting point is for all the ad geeks out there is, and you'll have to check my math, is it feels like it must be 15 years ago. We're all getting older, but Betty White on the Snickers.
Oh yeah.
Betty White in the Super Bowl Snickers ad crushed. It was all time. To me it's top 5, forever. And I think there's something super powerful about when you're not putting the hottest, 20-something Gen Z person, in front of the camera, a celebrity. You haven't seen somebody in 20 or 30 years or thought about them, but they're at that national treasure level, like Betty White was, is that they tend to break through and win on the Super Bowl. They just win hearts and minds because you're like, it's William Shatner, it's Betty White. And there's been a few of those. There's been a few controversial ones, like the Clint Eastwood Halftime in America was a little controversial that year. But when you keep it lighthearted and the kind of the culture around the Super Bowl is, it's a big group of people. And so you usually look for people that are instantly recognizable. As William Shatner is one of those people who like cuts across generations. You haven't thought about him in a while, but you can instantly recall who he is without having, to be reminded of who is that again. And then the team brought this amazing idea forward with the pun on his name. And so if anybody hasn't watched The Spot, is the whole thing is a delicate dance around Will Shat, which is the past tense of a word. And I remember just where I was sitting the first time I saw it, and the room we were in with Doug and the team and Kellogg's. And when I tell you, it was one of the most seamless, turnkey, like, oh yeah, we're doing that moments I've ever had in advertising. And I just am so proud of the team that wrote it. And it just was one of those things when you saw it on a page, you were like, this will win the Super Bowl. Like, this is just that simple. It's that funny. It's got all the ingredients of what makes for great Super Bowl. And to everybody's credit, it pretty much stayed pure through that process. It didn't get, like 97 different paper cuts of why this won't work and we can't say it that way, which is usually what happens in the advertising process when so much money is being spent on Super Bowl. And so from the core of how it was presented to what you saw on TV last night, it's pretty much it. And it was just hilarious from moment one, and it was hilarious last night. And thinking about it right now, I find it to be hilarious. And when Shatner came on board, the team did a Zoom with him. He's 94, but he's in it. He's touring. He was like very hesitant about social media. I kind of have a couple platforms here or there. And what was amazing through the whole process is, I think as it went super viral before the game, he just fell in love with what was going on in the culture again. And so, like, you saw him yesterday commenting on posts all over the internet, like cracking jokes. It was phenomenal, man. It was like really like I hope to be 94 someday. And when I do, I hope that I've got that much energy to be, replying to everybody who hits you up on Instagram or hits you up on X. And so he delivered in the biggest way. And when he walks on set, you're just like, wow, this guy's going to do it. And he's 94 and he's going to do it. So it just upped everybody's game.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love it. It was a little bit of an ode to like the shit my pants turnaround and stuff from like the Kmart days, which I loved.
And it had been like, I don't know, a decade since like anybody kind of went to just like good old fashioned jokes on the Super Bowl. And I think we've tried every other emotional thing that you can do. But last night I was proud of not just the Raisin Bran work, but other spots as well, just leaning into humor again.
Yeah, good point. We need that in the world.
Yeah, if you study anything about this business, it's like most people, if you can get them to pay attention to an ad, like most of the time, it's like, let's just keep it light, man. Like, we're not going to solve all the problems of the world through this 30-second piece of communication. So the fact that I think everyone's leaning into that again, I think it's a pretty powerful thing. I think most people are really delighted by it.
I love the teaser of him eating Raisin Bran in the car as he's driving, because that's like your typical like meme of like girl doing her makeup or people doing weird things as they're driving into work that they shouldn't be doing. I think that was an important component because a lot of Super Bowl spots, like don't leave the fun and the action for the actual game itself, like too much pre-releasing. And I feel like the teaser is way better to get people to actually tune into the spot, when it actually airs in the game. I imagine you guys thought a lot about teasing and getting legs out of the concept and kind of pointing people to watch and tune in live.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, there's somebody on the other side of my video here named Maddie. She behind this, doing all the PR, are the best in the world. SEAL Team 6, Delta Force. The reason that you saw it in all those places you saw it was because they worked around the clock to make it happen. So thank you, Maddie. Thank you to everybody who it was literally a all hands on deck, 24/7 push. And for the true geeks out there, I think everyone will like this story, is one of the reasons why we had to win so big prior to the game. And so what you're alluding to, there's kind of like two Super Bowls. There's the Super Bowl that you buy and it's 110 million people are watching and you get your 30, 60, 90 seconds, whatever it is. And then because the way that Super Bowl and NFL culture goes is really after the AFC, NFC, it starts to explode. Like you can see it. Anybody listening out there, your Instagram feed starts being like, this is a Super Bowl ad. A friend sends you something that's kind of fun. You turn on Good Morning America and you see Super Bowl ads. It really is American culture, and the ads are at the center of the culture, even more so than the game itself for a lot of people who are casual fans and usually not fans of the two teams playing. So those 2 weeks are so big. And to your point, sometimes you just run your spot and, it kind of gets old. You start seeing it in all broadcasts. Like you see it on the Oscars, you see it in all these other places, or not the Oscars, the Grammys. And it's kind of like worn out by the time you get there. I think an interesting this year, Maddie, we can talk about the national local dynamic, right? Ish. All right, I got an ish, but I'm gonna give you some. But one thing you'll see if you go on the USA ad meter, you won't see the Raisin Bran commercial. So why not? It was actually a different strategy for us based on where their business is at, where they need to win, that we opted into more of a regional buy, as well as a buy on Peacock. If you're watching Peacock, everybody saw it. But if you're watching linear broadcast, you only saw it in a few different markets. And so when you're taking, that playbook, and you know that you're not going to get the full reach in the national consideration, you're not going to be the USA Today the day after, is your creative has to be kick-ass, and you need the world's best comms team and the most creative people to get your spot up to the top of the pile so that everybody is drawn to it, that it gets into the national discourse and the culture around Super Bowl. And so it's super, super rare that happens. And that's why I'm so pumped with this, is that the majority of America, I'm sure you feel the same way, is like, it was one of the biggest spots. It wasn't on the national broadcast other than
wow. I didn't realize, because I watched it on Peacock.
Yeah, and Peacock's exploding. And so as we were thinking about strategy, it just made more sense given where the business is, the geographies they need to win, where the audience is, again, especially younger audiences, that the streaming national play plus local was just the best strategy for us. And NBC did a phenomenal job helping us, put all those pieces together. And again, back to where you started with the picture you're referring to, that TMZ cover that went kind of viral all over the planet, was just like this totally innocent moment of 94-year-old William Shatner eating a bowl of cereal behind the wheel. And what I loved about it, like obviously it struck a chord in a cool way, was that I think we all kind of saw ourselves in that moment of just like, damn, like this is just living, you're sitting in the car, you're chilling, you're having your bowl of cereal. And I think as we kind of, again, very strategically were able to get those photos out into the world, and then they were able to get all that momentum, it was just wild to see, because you never know. Like, the species might find that to be super compelling or way boring. And for whatever reason, it hit at the right time in the right place. And I think it was really, Maddie, the TMZ one, that like when it hit, it just became like syndicated and shared like on fire through the world. And I've never received more texts, more anything, but be like, have you seen this Will Shatner Raisin Bran thing? Not knowing I had anything to do with it. It was just like, it was the creation of true culture, which is what brands always try to do. And it just is one of those moments. I remember turning on like Fox 5 or something in the morning. It was like a 3-minute segment where each of the anchors were just like, oh, that's so me. Like my best day in the world is when I'm just sitting there chilling in my car, eating a bowl of cereal. Like that is me. And so I think a lot of people just identified and kind of empathized with it and just felt the need to share it. And so that gave us like the kickstart to be like, wow, something's happening with Raisin Bran, that when we finally dropped the spot prior to the game, it was like, oh man, it all makes sense now. And so there was a little bit of that like stunt factor where it was misdirect and people were like, what is this? And then when it got found out that it was Raisin Bran, unlike a lot of things we do in advertising, it wasn't a letdown because the spot was badass. When people watch the spot, they were just like, that's amazing and that's hilarious. And so that is a very narrow needle to thread. And we, as an industry, usually don't thread it that well. It's usually like you punk somebody and then it's a huge letdown, like, the advertisers. In this case, they ruin everything. In this case, it was 1 + 1 = 9. And so we're just so fortunate it all happened. But like, I think the ad gods just kind of shined down on us a little bit around that whole thing.
Yeah, totally. I think it also points to an insight of like, the boomers are now the largest population, and, everybody has that, parent or grandparent who's kind of like, they're not your average grandparent. They're out there traveling the world. They're living their best life. Like retirement doesn't look at all like the fact that Bill is still working at 94. Like that's the example, right? Like there is no retirement.
Yeah. He's got a comedy tour. He's, like he did a 12-hour day. Like I can barely do those days anymore. He's crushing it. He was an inspiration, man. I mean, we should all be like him if that's your thing. He's not stopping. He's not slowing down.
I mean, do you remember when he dropped that album with Ben Folds?
And it's unreal when you look at like his IMDb, the stuff he's done. Anybody who is 94 and has that long of a career, it just spans every generation. Like, and he's ridden like every cultural wave from early Star Trek and beyond, pun intended.
So good. All right, tell me about the Omelet King. How, why, and what does that do for you as a creative to have this kind of test kitchen, literally no pun intended, of you being able to work things out on social and have your own audience to communicate and try things? Like, how important was it, and how did you become a creator? When was that part of your story?
Oh my goodness, this is a fun one. So like all things Vayner, it started with a really funny conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk, which went something like this. This is the abridged version, but he'd seen, I've come from Saatchi. I've been here a couple of years. We were doing our thing, and just like in a casual conversation, was like, something about your guys' whole industry is that, have any of you ever made anything with no media dollars to support it and no production dollars? And I was like, oh, Gary, like, we're advertising people. Like, we kind of get the money, and that's kind of how we get the reach, and we do the production, and that's what allows us to make these things. And he, like, in passing, was just kind of like, yeah, you should try it sometime to see if you're actually any good.
So good.
And it was so pure of a statement because he's so accurate, which what he really meant was, there's, only these pipes of these platforms, and we're all kind of equals within these pipes now, since it's not about followers. And, his point of view was that, we have to compete against, whether it's Gary Vee or Mr. Beast or, the Omelet King, we'll get to the story, is the craft around making things for social media and actually earning attention without paid media is the most important skill. And for anybody listening, if you're on the fence about, making things and putting yourself out there, it literally is one of those start by starting things. And so this is really my start by starting story. And because of that prompt from Gary, I was just so fired up, where it's like, we did Tide ad on the Super Bowl in 2018 and had 7 Super Bowl ads. He's like, yeah, what would happen if you didn't have money? Would you guys still be any good? And long story short is it coincided with a text message I sent him about a new app that was called Musical.ly that became TikTok.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I texted him about TikTok, and he said 2 words back, all in. And I had met his brother years prior, he founded the company with him and is now the CEO of Vayner Sports. I remember AJ telling me, if my brother's ever all into something, like just fully like trust fall, just go. Like, because he's never all in unless he's really sure that it's going to be like an important thing. So I was like, all right, this is my moment. Like, first I got like Gary kind of making fun of me, like, which is good. I like getting razzed, it's like the athlete in me. And then 2 is he's all in on this new thing called TikTok that's apparently where like 8th graders dance. It's like, okay, you gotta remember, it's like 2019 TikTok in America, where it literally was like 8th graders dancing, and we all kind of but Gary could see the attention was shifting there, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, all right, that's why I'm here. Like, I learn from him every day, so I'm going to lean into it. And I go home that weekend, and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't really dance well, so that's kind of like off the table. And I grew up in the restaurant business and learned from my brother is I like to cook omelets for everybody. And so I happened to have some people over. And I was like, screw it. I was like, let me download this TikTok app. He's all in on that. So I got that. I was like, Jenny, my wife, begrudgingly, she's like, come over my shoulder and just film me flipping the egg. She's like, what are you doing? Like, we've got they all want to eat. Like, don't drop their breakfast on the floor. And so I post it. It goes live. Boy, is Gary Vaynerchuk right. I get like 212 views. I was like, I suck. I'm like, my whole career is a scam. Like, take the cam lions, burn them. Like, I got nothing. Without money, who am I? And so I'm like, but again, hold the line. Like, what Gary would do. It's like, just lean into it. More. So I post like 8 or 9 more, 500 views, 400 views. I'm like, man, I really suck. Like, this is really bad. And then that next weekend, I plan to do a 360 where I get it and I throw it in the air and I spin and I catch it. and I'm in a Santa outfit. And I have a bunch of friends on the other side of the camera being like, Nick's truly lost it at this point. And I don't catch it. And it lands on the sheet that we put down. Being like, the sheet will at least eat it. It's not the ground. The sheet's clean, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I can never post this, you know. I'm also like a creative perfectionist at this point where I'm like, I need 4 rounds of rough cuts before I'd be able to put that out, you know. And my wife, Jenny, takes the phone. She's like, what would Gary do? Like, this is what you have to start embracing. So she listened to so many phone calls with me and Gary that she's like, Gary would just post it, you know, like document, don't create. It's one of his great lines where he's just like, put it out.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And so I posted a thing with a Christmas track on it around Christmas time of me dropping an omelet, which I was mortified from. And so I take my phone, I put it down. I come back like 4 hours later. I open back TikTok up. I have like 12 million views.
What?
What is happening? And so that kind of kickstarted what has been now a 6-year, you know, billions and billions of views later, and pan deals and egg deals and all the things that would happen of what I would say is you know, an omelet king, you know, kind of like thing that I do to the side, which allows me the opportunity without, you know, all the mechanisms of big brand advertising to stay as current as possible on every single platform and be making every day. And so I'd say for anybody listening, like, make every day is one of the best prescriptions I ever got from Gary. And it changed my creative life forever. You know, like I literally was that guy who was just such a stereotype of the ad industry. I came up in it. This is how we do it. You know, you sit in the lab for days on end. You then tweak it. You then spend millions of dollars and you hope that it's right. And you think that it's great because enough of your friends also thought it was great. So they gave you a statue about it. And what it really did was like just a trial by fire on, can I actually make things that people want to pay attention to? And then most importantly, in all of those reps and practice, I bring that right into all 200 plus of our awesome partners that we have around the globe as inspiration, as insight, as things that I'm learning, because I have the freedom to create every single day on like the 8 platforms that really matter. And so, you know, like I was practicing on Snap Spotlight, you know, probably a year before there was more than 2 brands in our building who even knew what Snap Spotlight was. Same thing with YouTube. And so in a way, like, I can't advocate for it enough. Like, if you study Gary at all, and if you're a fan of his and our brand, is brand Gary V, and he would tell this story, you know, to everybody listening, was really, you know, a way for him to show the world, including his would-be clients, this is the model of the future. And so he kind of did it to himself and became Gary V as a byproduct of that. It was someone who's super well known now through the power of social media. But many of the things, almost like the majority of the things that you see from Raisin Brand or our other partners out in the world, came from the lab of Gary V and his immediate team, which he has, you know, an incredible amount of practitioners around him that make that machine work every single day with him at the center. And so I can't advocate for it enough. Is like, just make things. Don't debate making things. Get out. Don't use an excuse of, well, my client won't allow me to. Start your own handle. You know, whatever you're interested in. If you're interested in old cars, you know, just start making things about old cars. Turn on a camera. Talk about it. If you can draw a picture of it. Post it. But learning the mechanics, the craft of social media is the number one job of any marketer out there. I actually think, like, if you don't know, it's very hard to be relevant moving forward in our industry. And the cool thing about it is when you're in it day to day, is you see that the platform and the product of each platform changes pretty much every day. You know, that today a carousel with 10 plus pictures on Instagram with the trending audio will outperform a single image posted on Instagram without a trending audio track. That's true today. Might not be true tomorrow. They might re-engineer the platform to be completely different. You know, and TikTok Live is a huge deal today. And next month, Instagram Live may eclipse the attention of TikTok Live. You know, and you just have to stay so close to the platforms, the algorithms, and then the culture that's going on in all of these platforms. We call that pack. And that's really like the bedrock of modern day marketing and how you put social at the center of the entire ecosystem that you build as a marketer.
Yeah, that's really great. I think it's great advice to, you know, not only everybody in our industry, but just people at large. You know, I always, you know, it's funny. I've been hearing Gary at keynotes, you know, for 15 plus years, and I never heard him say the same thing twice until recently. I saw him 3 times at Shop Talk, at Possible, and at your guys' thing at CES. Talk about the idea that any brand who's not investing 20% of their budget in organic content and leveraging the fact that we live in an algorithm driven society now, not a follower based society, and that we all have an equal playing field. Why would you ever put paid media behind something that you hadn't tested out first when you have this amazing laboratory opportunity across all of these platforms? I think this goes well into the idea that if you're an advertising professional or you're a marketer and you're not using these platforms as a creator of one, like, you are missing an opportunity to craft your own personal brand, but also to understand how these platforms work.
Yeah.
So on that note, I think you've done a great kind of sum up of why it's important for the individual based on your own story. But could you maybe dive a little bit more? Like, it's almost like if Gary says things at 3 keynotes in a row, it's almost like he's trying to tell us that like Armageddon is coming or something. So can you talk a little bit about this idea of Gary, like, really pounding this idea of organic social before you invest $1 of paid?
Yeah. And I think I got to go in like 2 minutes.
So yeah, you're good. Why don't you wrap up with this and then I'll hard outro you.
All right. Beautiful. So for anybody following along, right? Like we went from this era of social media, the follower graph, which was I posted something, it went out to a percentage of my followers. Those people, if they shared it, could expand the base of people who saw it, but it was pretty limited to the follower base. What we refer to modern social media now as interest media. It's based on the interest graph. It's why when you open the Reels tab, you're watching things primarily from people who you don't follow. And what that interest graph is an algorithm that is literally studying what the world pays attention to, you versus me today versus me in 2 weeks, because my interests change. And it's serving you things before you even know that you're thinking about it, is the way it should feel, and that are super compelling to you. And so that pivot is one that still in the marketing world is very misunderstood. Right? And for good reason. We spent years building playbooks and trainings and hiring people for a follower-based version of social media. And so now, with interest media being the predominant kind of product form factor of just about every social network, from Snap Spotlight to Instagram Reels to TikTok to YouTube Shorts, et cetera, is maybe one of the biggest opportunities in the history of me doing this, which is every single thing you create has the potential to have maximum impact and views in a way that you can't fathom. The same way that my one TikTok reached 12 million people is just mind-blowing that is happening every day at such an ungodly scale that human beings can't even process it. But in these platforms, that's the currency of the whole platform, is they need to surface the things that are of the best quality or most relevant to each individual audience so that people don't leave and go to some other app. And so if you think about what's the moat you can build or the competitive advantage in a business context, or if you're a creator that's trying to make money off this, is a machine that is able to understand, like, through, creating many, many things, is how to be relevant with those many things to many different audiences. And so the 20% number comes from, if you're a big brand, if you're a big coffee brand, it's like you're trying to sell to every single person in the country who has a mouth, right? The interest graph of every single person in the country that has a mouth are very broad. You now need to find a way to be able to get your brand into the interest graph, because people are not all seeing the same thing. And so 20% is actually, I think he's still like getting everybody attuned to that frequency, but I imagine that it goes even greater than that, because the creative variable is the factor of success. It always has been. But in this era of what media is becoming, if that is not world-class, if it doesn't earn attention organically, all you will do is waste money covering up with paid media what is bad creative that could be working way harder. So think about it like in the old days. Anybody's been doing this for a while. Like, you used to do, quantitative testing of animatics and storyboards and focus groups. Basically, what organic now is that. And as it qualifies, it's real qualification. It's not bullshit in a lab, with behind a two-way mirror focus group. It's actually being seen by thousands, potentially millions of people. And once you get that signal, what we're finding is, as you amplify with paid media on top of something that worked that well, it's lights out in performance compared to something that didn't qualify, that you just kind of hoped and, on a subjective bias, made a gamble with your client's money, or a brand's money than you put paid media against. And so like what he talks a lot about, and I've actually tasted this with so many of my CMO friends, is that like, why wouldn't you build that system and actually like eliminate the waste that you're experiencing on paid media that's covering up stuff? And any great media person knows that like the creative variable and even the platforms will tell you this, of like 50 to 70% of the performance of media is dictated by the creative. I venture to say it's way more than that. But I would say like, if it is not optimized and you're just putting huge budgets behind it, it's just really something that you should rethink moving forward, because it's just doing damage, you know, like, and it's not working as hard as it can be. And so it's 20% today, it's 25% tomorrow, like whatever it takes to drive relevance at scale, which is what's necessary for most big brands and small brands to compete.
So good. All right. Last but not least, where should people connect with you or learn more about Vayner?
Just type into your LLM or your search bar or Instagram at VaynerX, at VaynerMedia, me at Nick Miaritis, Miaritis. And yeah, I hope to hear from everyone. Hopefully this was fun for everyone.
Love it, buddy. Thanks so much. Appreciate you spending some time with us. See you, Nick.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, everybody. If you enjoyed that episode, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a like or a subscribe or whatever things you do on the platforms that you're watching the show. If you are listening to the show, an honest review is how we find a larger audience organically. I don't know about you guys, but that was a really great opportunity for me to talk to Nick coming off Super Bowl weekend, the biggest night in advertising and media, and getting a play-by-play of how the Raisin Brand campaign came together, the insight around Bill Shatner, and just the thinking behind the powerhouse that is VaynerMedia right now. I'm super pumped up. I'm going to take this into my week and apply as much as I can immediately and moving forward. Last but not least, if there's an ad practitioner out somewhere there in your network, a Gary Vee fan, or a potential creator that has told you that they've had an idea for an Instagram channel, a vlog, a blog, a Twitch stream, whatever the thing, you got to just start creating. Don't worry about what your college friends think. Don't worry about what your family thinks. Just start creating, create that laboratory. And I hope to tune in to whatever you end up making.